I'm your host, Soraya Sinozie, and this is Diaspora and Development, where we give voice to people of the diaspora working in international development. My guest today is France Francois, a social impact leader who is currently the Director of Global Community Management at TikTok. In addition to working with TikTok, France is a founder and former executive director of Incultured Company, an organization committed to racial equality and transforming legacies of conflict between Black and Latinx leaders and communities. France previously worked in international development throughout the Middle East and the Americas. She has a master's in international development from American University and a law degree from the University of London. France, I'm so happy that you can join me today. Let's dive in. France, as you well know, the focus of our discussion is why you left international development. Let's start with what attracted you to the field of international development and how you started your career.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I have a master's in international development and conflict resolution from the American University in Washington, D.C. And I think like everyone who gets a Western liberal arts education, you're taught that you're going to go out there and save the world and have this outsized impact on the lives of people who are less fortunate than you. And so I was quite drawn to the idea of doing good in the world, as well as being able to, quote unquote, give back, given that my family is Haitian and my parents were quite active as activists opposing the dictatorship. So I felt, I guess, a sense of obligation as well as a draw towards international development.
Yeah, so I've heard a lot of that. I spoke previously to Annick Silencieux, who was my first guest, and she spoke about how present it is in the Haitian community to be active, to participate in protests, to volunteer in community activities. So there's quite a drive in the community to want to do something to make a change.
Yeah, I don't think this is unique to the Haitian community or the immigrant experience as a whole. I think for those of us who come from communal cultures rather than individualistic cultures, the idea is always that the individual is only as good as the whole, right? So your success is a reflection of your family and your community, and you always want to ensure that you are pulling others up as you rise.
Indeed. So what led to your disenchantment? Why did you decide to leave?
First, I started working in the Middle East. That was my original focus. I was in Egypt learning Arabic and also working with urban refugees within that environment. And that was the same year both the earthquake in Haiti happened as well as the Arab Spring broke out. And I was quite disillusioned with working in the Middle East. And so I took the opportunity to go back and work in the country of my birth. And when I arrived in Haiti the first time, I realized a few things. One, that nobody was waiting to be saved. The people on the ground had their own ideas of what rebuilding Haiti would look like, what resources they needed, and who should have a seat at the table. And really, all they needed was for us to kind of get out of their way and let them do what they needed to do. And then two, they were often undermined from participating actively in the development of Haiti, particularly after the earthquake. There are a lot of statistics that show that less than 1% of the money raised for Haiti during the earthquake went to the Haitian government or Haitian-led organizations. It became a gold rush for anybody from US, Canada, any random European country with like an idea. And there was such a significant misalignment between what was being proposed in Geneva or Brussels or Washington and what the people actually needed. And that sometimes was by design. And I think lastly, it was because the system of international development, when you really engage with it and take a critical eye to it, you realize that it recreates rather than addresses systems of inequality. racism, oppression, sexual violence, all of those things are embedded within international development. And there is no real to end poverty because poverty is a business. If poverty ended, all of our former would no longer drive their Teslas. They would no longer be able to put their kids in the best private schools and no longer be able to afford their homes in Bethesda and their vacations in the south of France and things like that. So when your entire business model is dependent on keeping somebody down so that you continue to have projects and programs to fund, there's no way that countries like Haiti and others are actually going to be lifted out of poverty in this current model. And so I became disillusioned with it and the ways in particular that Black and Brown voices are sidelined intentionally in international development, and I left.
So you said two important things. You said that people were not waiting for to be rescued and they were trying to do things on their own. And the second thing that you said was that poverty is a business. Can you explain a little bit or elaborate a little bit more what you mean by that?
I think oftentimes when you go into certain fields like international development, humanitarian aid work, or even some of the images you see, they position the Westerner as saving the person from the developing world. Let's recall, for example, how Anderson Cooper really exploded and shot to national attention during the earthquake in Haiti with his coverage of all these largely white teams of rescuers pulling Black Haitians out of rubble and things like that. But in reality, most people were saved by their own communities. It was mostly the communities within those crucial hours right after the earthquake, without any equipment, digging people out with their hands and what they had. The rescuers did very little of the actual rescue, but got most of the attention because that's who the cameras followed. And that's the story that the media wanted to tell. Similarly, with development, oftentimes communities have figured out whether it's through mutual aid, combis, other ways of providing themselves with the resources they need when either the government fails or the international community fails. So people will raise food and exchange that for other goods that they need, sell off their livestock. People often will find in rural areas an elderly woman is watching the children so that the younger people can go off to work and things like that. People have found ways to survive within systems. And often all they need is really money. Money is the only resource that people need in a lot of these situations so that they can build the infrastructure or get the knowledge and the skills or the tools that they need. But because of the ways that we often position people from the developing world as less knowledgeable, as almost infantile, it's really difficult to get money to those organizations or to those communities. We often want to give money to a third party that we feel is more respectable, more knowledgeable about what those communities need, and therefore should be the go-between between our resources, our plans, and those communities themselves.
They think a third party organization or a larger organization or a foreign organization is more trustworthy.
Right. And so like I recall, for example, in meetings where you'd have local Haitian architects with the experience designing in that climate, with who had worked, for example, in Chile and other environments that had dealt with earthquakes and had experience designing quake-proof housing and all of these things, and housing that was suitable for the Caribbean climate, for climate change in particular, who would present these plans and be completely sidelined by someone from Arkansas, for example, with a plan that costs 3 or 4 times more. But because we have more trust in Westerners and we have more belief that they know what's best for people in the developing world, those others got sidelined all the time. So there was one, for example, minister in Haiti who was actually Haitian American. He was Haitian who had been living in the US, and he had years of experience doing construction as well as urban planning and design, and went back to work for the Haitian government during the earthquake and had designed these amazing plans of how to rebuild certain neighborhoods in Port-au-Prince to one, address the density issue while also being like culturally respectful and culturally relevant. And he spent years before the World Bank would give him just a couple $100,000. And when we went to visit that housing development, people were so proud to show us like their homes. They invited us in. They showed us the laku, the garden that they maintained as a community. And all of these things that they felt proud, they felt respected in their homes. And you could see the difference in those people versus Food for Peace, for example, which got millions of dollars to build very, very shoddy housing. But because they had a relationship with USAID, they kind of got a blank check to build, when in reality, they were an organization that did just what their name said. They provided food during crises, they handed out meals, and all of a sudden they go from handing out meals to handling multi-million-dollar construction projects and building shoddy housing that didn't even survive the first rain season. And people were showing us the cracks in their building, the fact that they didn't have any running water or sewage built yet because Food for Peace just did not have the capabilities to build in that situation. But they were Americans, they were foreign, and so they got the money, even though the Haitian minister had a much better plan and actually had proof of concept. So
That's quite interesting. You mentioned two things, Combit and Lakou, which we should go into because some people will not know what Combit and Lakou mean. And when you're talking about the business of poverty, and the money that is being given by international organizations, by governments like the US, Canada, etc., there's something that you're mentioning, I think that we should go into about that business. So why is Food for the Poor getting that money rather than a local organization? Money is tied to some responsibility or some things that they have to follow through. Do you know a little bit about that?
yeah, so I think when I say poverty is a business, it's twofold. It's both what you've mentioned, but also the reality of the multilateral bank structure, these organizations. They're not doing this work for free or out of the benevolence of their heart. These are loans that they're giving out with very, very high interest rates that often require the governments to cut back on other aspects of their life.
There are two things. There's aid money that is tied to certain regulations in terms of who needs, if you're going to give money for aid, then it has to go, the contracting has to go to foreign contractors. And then there's loan money, which is also its own idea. Can you tell us a little bit about the two differences?
Yeah, so there's definitely, as you mentioned, there's two differences. There's the aid funding that not only is it often required that you hire contractors from that government. So for example, if you are getting grant funding or aid funding from the US, you have to buy American, you have to employ American contractors. Often you even have to fly in on American flights. Like you can't even take, like, let's say Air Jamaica or something like that. It has to be an American carrier. So that money essentially funnels right back to the US, to the Beltway, to Washington, D.C. So there's that aspect of poverty being a business. And then there's the aspect of the loans that the multilateral banks and the IMF make, which have very, very high interest rates and also have requirements that often mean that these governments are taking money from their social programs and from other aspects of infrastructure to pay back these loans. And the debt can go on for generations, like at a time. And there's a significant push to oftentimes behind the scenes to get governments to accept these loans and these debts because it's to the benefit of the person working in the bank to show like how many of these contracts they've been able to sign and things like that. So it's a business. Like a bank is a business. That is why it's called the bank. They're not benevolent benefactors. They want returns on their investment, whether those returns are financial returns through the significantly high interest rates, or their more soft power returns through diplomacy or through providing opportunities for their young men, particularly young men, to work elsewhere, work abroad.
Super, thank you. You remain quite tied to the issues of inequality, international development, and injustice through your former blog and through your past work with InCultured. What drives you? Can you tell us a little bit more about InCultured and other social activities that you are working on?
Sure. So, because I spent a significant time in my development career working in Haiti, it's very hard to ignore the issues that Haitians face elsewhere, particularly in the Dominican Republic. So, InCultured Company was a reflection of how bad the relationship between Haiti and the Dominican Republic have gotten within the past decade or so as the Dominican Republic has moved farther and farther to the right, as the DRs move farther to the right. And much of the region has moved to the right. To be honest, you see a scapegoating of racial and ethnic minorities, and particularly anyone perceived to be Haitian, which is just anyone dark skinned outside in the DR. So, InCultured Company started as a way to really think about peace building and recapturing our history as Haitians and Dominicans, and hopefully from a grassroots movement being able to reshape that narrative of violence and separation and move from a divided past to a shared future. And so I was the executive director and the founder of that organization, and we were able to do just really amazing work with Haitians and Dominicans, realizing that neither government is really invested in shifting the relationship right now. So it's really up to the people to make that investment at a grassroots level. The younger, the better, to be quite honest, if we want to reshape that narrative and reshape the island and not become like some of the other countries where we see border tensions, whether it's Israel, Palestine, or India, Pakistan, so on and so forth. I think that my drive has always come from my mother in particular. As I mentioned, my parents were political activists and had to flee Haiti as political refugees. But my mom was very much of the mind that we owed a duty to our country and to those who are more vulnerable than us. So even as a child, she would pull me out of class to go to protests, and always encourage me to speak up for those who were in a position where they were maybe not able to speak at that moment. And so when witnessing the level of violence, abuse, and human rights abuses that Haitians in the Dominican Republic go through, I think outside of the Haitians migrating to the US border right now, they're probably the most vulnerable group of Haitians amongst us. So it seemed to me just natural that we would create organization that hopefully makes their lives a little better in the long run.
Thank you. And you talked previously, and you explained a little about the concept of laku and kombit. Does that influence you? And can you talk a little bit more about what laku and kombit mean within our culture?
Yeah, so a laku is basically in traditional Haitian housing, all the extended relatives would live within one compound per se, and that compound would face inward into what is called a laku. So all the houses would be built around it, facing inward into this one social space. Sometimes people use it for farming and gardening, but it was also used as the social center where everyone met. And this communal living is very much reflected, I think, to it in Haitians when we go elsewhere. You often see that Haitians settle near each other. Even if you're in an apartment building, maybe your aunt lives one floor up, or your grandma lives, a couple houses down. So we've recreated the laku to the best of our ability elsewhere, and that sense of community, I think, is really important because it it allowed for us an accountability to your community, to your ancestors, to your extended family, that made sure that you were always aware of your role in society as a whole. Um, and the kombit is something that comes from farming and rural communities in which all the farmers would work each other's land together. And it's almost like the living embodiment of that Haitian proverb, "Main pile palu," which means like many hands make the load lighter. So rather than just farming your land and making sure that, your crops grew and you could sell them at market and you were prosperous, you realize that actually this land is shared land. And if one person's crops isn't flourishing, that or one person's crops or their goods are facing some kind of pest invasion, that'll have a larger impact on the entire community as a whole. All the farmers would get together and work each other's land and ensure that the prosperity was shared all together. And again, I think this is also even outside of the rural areas, something that Haitians try to maintain, where the idea of being Haitian is always tied to the larger Haitian community. We can talk about whether that's positive or negative, but you are always hopefully trying to think of like how you can pull up a seat at the table for someone else, make space for someone else, ensure that the resources that you've received are shared amongst the community if you're actually being Haitian, right?
It's true. I mean, we live for our community, with our community, and sometimes in spite of our community. And it's a very interesting way of looking at things. We, as in many communities, we're very focused sometimes on what's not working. But when you look back, we do recreate these concepts everywhere we go. And there is a spirit of community. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it's begrudging, but it's there. It survives
Right.
many iterations. Recently, during the pandemic, I believe you decided to stop writing your blog and a little put and quiet down your activities, your social activities, your social activism. What led you to that decision?
Yeah, I think it was a very difficult decision. I really struggled with it. I talked to friends and mentors. I even cried about it. And I realized that I was giving so much of myself to the community that there was nothing left for the other things that I wanted to accomplish. Like I wanted to have a family, and there are other interests that I'd like to explore, like creative interests. And it was really difficult to do that while also being an activist, because an activist, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. It is 24/7. It is whenever there's an emergency. It is every time an earthquake or a landslide hits, anytime a violence happens and things like that. It can be very both lonely and traumatic
Mm-hmm.
to live an existence that's so tied to pushing past the worst things that have happened to us. And so I wanted to make space to live for the best aspects of us, as Haitians, as Black people, as women. And so that required me to hand the activism to a younger generation and allow them to do with it what they will. Like they will make of it what they want it, and they'll shape the vision. And I have to just be okay with that. I didn't want to become the kind of leader that creates almost a cult of personality per se, where if something happens to me, all the work that I've been doing just stops, just disappears because it cannot continue. And we've seen that, I think, a lot with a lot of work that Black leaders have done in the past, um, where you take out the head and everything else falls apart.
Mhm.
And so I didn't want to be that head. I wanted to hopefully be able to walk away and watch this grow and continue without me and pursue other things.
That's a move. That's quite an activism move if you think about it as well. Um, a lot of people don't take time for themselves, their mental health, realize that they need a break, realize that they need to pass the baton. So that's something that a lot of people can learn from. I think that one thinks that they have to give themselves fully all the time, and if they're not whole, then they're not giving themselves fully. Within your wish to continue to support community, that move and what you're talking about also is something that needs to be talked about. That's a support for community as well. Supporting and taking time for yourself allows for a better movement and a better understanding of what it requires to be an activist and when you need
Yeah, no,
to pause. Yeah.
yeah, thanks for saying that. It was really interesting when I made the decision because there were a couple things that had happened. Like my mother had died quite young a few years ago during the pandemic. And when I decided to step back and really kind of focus on myself, having seen her example where she literally died for her job. Like my mother was a nurse and her job was just posted a few days later. Like her employer didn't even send flowers to the funeral. And I was watching so many Black women around me in particular um, go through these, whether it was like cancer scares or other health scares, or just like flat out die of exhaustion. Like so many Black women just like young, in their 40s, just keeled over and died in the past few years. And there was no space made to talk about like what this work actually does to you and
Mhm.
how it really can eat away at you if you don't have the opportunity, the means, the privilege to walk away or the support system also. And so you see a lot of people become very bitter and angry online, and it impacts their work.
Mhm.
Because again, the work is so tied sometimes to the individual. And I've watched this happen with a lot of my counterparts because perhaps they don't have the ability or they don't have the words yet to say, actually, I need a break. And when my mom passed away, I was just like, I'm not gonna let this happen to me. Like I'm no good to anyone dead or bitter or angry or tired or all of these things.
So that leads to the question of how and why did you move to the private sector? And particularly, what advice do you have for others who want to leave international development for another field? And not just the international development field. A lot of us do work in things that have to support the community, health. A lot of us are a lot of the people in different communities, not just the Haitian community, but in diaspora, are working in the health sector. They're working as lawyers. It's all about supporting community, and it's a hard move. So you moved from international development and you worked many years in international development into the move in the private sector. So how did you do that, and why did you do that? And do you have any advice for others?
Yeah, so I actually made a whole TikTok video about this because
Great.
it's a question I get asked. It's also my only TikTok video, so
I'll
it's not
post
hard
it
to
in the
find.
line. I'll post it in the
Um, but I get asked this question a lot, and so I gave some advice in that video. I think the so to answer first your question of why, I realized that I did not want to make money off my passions or my community anymore. And it was really important for me to separate those two so that like my work is just work. And I use the resources I've gained from that work to fund my passions, to fuel my passions, but the two are not related. directly at all. And it gave me the ability, particularly when I was leading in cultured company, to say no to like partnerships and opportunities that didn't fit us. For example, because like I didn't need the money. So I didn't need to like water down our mission or work with like sketchy organizations that just wanted to like use our black face to put on their posters or whatever. And that flexibility to be able to do something that you're really passionate about without worrying about money is really great. And I would extend that too. So like I'm also really passionate about photography, but that's my own passion. I'm not a professional photographer, and I don't think I ever would want to be, because then you're working for a client and you make artistic judgments, and you give up some of your artistic licensing for the check. So that was the reason I left and I moved to the private sector. The transition was not easy. It took me over a year to actually find a job in tech. I was looking to move into tech. And it really took me understanding how to position the things that I'd done in the past and the skills that I'd built in international development in a way that people from outside that sector understood. So learning to speak tech, in this case, speaking their language and positioning my skills in their language in a way that translated to the job post was really, really important. And that took a lot of trial and error in order to be able to do, as well as a lot of conversations with people who were very gracious with their time and looked over my resume and things like that. But like getting your elevator pitch right is so important. Getting your name in front of people, having people understand what you do and with what qualities and skills you bring to the table, so that when opportunities arise, they know you and they're ready to, put your name on the list. It was really important. And that unfortunately takes time. It takes networking, it takes relationship building, but in the long run, it's really helpful, because a lot of the opportunities I've gotten since are from people who are like, oh yeah, I remember I talked to France and she is actually really good at conflict resolution. And right now we're having a really significant problem between company X and company Y, for example. And so I think that's the advice I would give folks, is really understanding how to make your skills transferable, networking within the industry that you want, and finding people who will advocate for you and, be your sponsors, for example, when opportunities arise.
Thank you. Do you think international development can work?
No, I don't think it can work. I think that it's a system that is based on a colonial model of develop versus developing, East versus West, and things like that. And without ways to really give developing countries a seat at the table and an opportunity in particular to say no, it won't work. It will always be the will of the more powerful countries being imposed on the least powerful. And that's not a model that's worked in any other industry. So I don't see it working in development. And I'm sorry to my development colleagues who are still there, but I have not found
Myself as well.
yeah, I just have not seen a model of development that actually works outside of development that's led by the people themselves, by the national government, by also a strong national government that has its people's interest in mind. For example, if you look at South Korea after the Korean War, where it was destitute, completely devastated country that then had leaders that had the foresight to like focus in on education, focus on industrialization and building industry and perfecting those industries, and ensuring that the benefits that were being gained were equally distributed. Like that is the only model where it's led by a strong government, as well as like strong civil society, where I've seen it work. I don't
Rwanda
think,
comes to mind as well. Rwanda.
yeah, but I don't think fundamentally, I do not think outsiders are invested in the development of your country. There's no reason why somebody else would be investing the time, money, expertise that it takes to actually pull your people out of poverty. Like why would they do, it's like investing all your time in making sure your neighbor's kid goes to private school, whereas when your kid's still, struggling in public school, nobody would do that. It's like the airport or the planes when they tell you to put your own mask first before you put your neighbor's mask on. Development is just like that. Every single country will put their own mask on first and make sure their people are okay. And then they'll turn to Haiti or Jamaica or you know, Kenya or Rwanda or Sudan or whatever and say, oh, well, oh, you're still alive? Okay. I guess I can help you now with your mask now that my people are fine.
What's next for you?
I don't know what's next for me. I'm really happy and excited to be in the tech space right now. I also finished law school during this time and am particularly interested in data privacy and regulation, particularly in the ways that it impacts marginalized groups and voices that are often left out of tech spaces. I think that interest came from my experience in Cultured Company when we were often the recipients of a lot of online harassment, trolling, bullying, and doxing, as well as like harassment that went from online to offline. And the platforms were not able or willing to help. Sometimes they didn't even have of native Spanish speakers who could understand what was going on. And so as AI and moderation and privacy has changed things so much, I'm really interested in how we ensure that we are also safe and we are also represented in those changes.
Thank you. In honor of my favorite podcast, Unlocking Us, hosted by the incomparable Brene Brown, please share with us the last TV show that you binged and loved, your favorite movie, a concert that you'll never forget, and what's your get up and dance song?
Ooh, the last TV show that I binged. So I just finished Succession, like everybody else. Um,
Yet.
yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's one of those few shows that has not a single likable character. And I really enjoyed that because the show exists in this moral gray area that I thought was really interesting. Then on the flip side of that, I know you didn't ask this, but I'm currently reading Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I've in the past few years I've really been investing in reading books written by women and people of color, and just the interesting dynamics and that they add to the literary canon on their character development I think is really interesting. And so Yellowface also has main character that is completely unlikable. This white woman that steals an Asian American woman's book and passes it off as her own. And so it's really interesting, I think, to grapple with people that are unlikable, and because it challenges the kind of person you think you are, like whether or not.
Especially in North America. Growing up in Canada, I had a lot of access to movies from other places. And one of the things I was always jarred by is like, where's the happy ending? Where's the nice person? Yeah. It's something that's not normal in North America. We have to have good, bad, etc. There's no gray area. We're not used to it.
Yeah. And so I'm enjoying, I think, the gray area of like complex characters that are not likable, because you even see this conversation going on right now on social media with that submarine, millionaires or billionaires, where it's a real challenge for people to find empathy with people that are just not likable. It challenges who you think you are as a person. And so I find those kinds of characters really interesting. You asked favorite movie, Forrest Gump. I'm a history nerd, and so I really love that movie for the ways that it incorporates all these monumental moments in history with a guy that's completely oblivious that he's living through some of the biggest moments in history. I really love that.
Your get up and dance song and a concert you'll never forget.
So my get up and dance song. Oh my gosh. What am I dancing to? So I think it would probably be soca. You know, if
Mhm.
I'm really thinking about it, I think like, you know, I definitely just started playing. You can never go wrong with Michael Montano
Mhm.
and Fast Wine or any of the other amazing songs he's put out. Like you can't sit during soca. Soca comes on and you just gotta
Cannot.
get
You
up.
cannot. If I hear
Yeah.
Kes right now, I'm getting up.
Right, exactly. I saw Kes last year in concert and like he had everyone on their feet. Um
Ah, is that a
and
concert you'll never forget?
it was actually Michael Blanc's bio concert and it was great. Every time I've been, it's been great. But I actually just came back from Beyonce in Paris
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and I know the Beehive will probably dig up this recording in 10 years, but I'm not a big Beehive member. I'm not a big Stan kind of person.
Mhm.
And so I went into the concert very blind. Um I didn't have an opinion one way or the other, but I was blown away by her skill, the level of like talent and technicality that went into the show, like her voice, the dancing, every aspect of it was just so amazingly well done. So much respect to Beyonce. It has to be one of the most unforgettable concerts I've been to.
Wow, that's a great way to end. Thank you very much for your time, France. This was much appreciated.
No problem. Anytime. All right, talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye.